Are you looking to grow revenues, increase profitability, or obtain financing? If so, you came to the right place.
Running a business is all about leadership. How do you become a better leader? Learn from the successful entrepreneurs and business owners how to lead your organization more effectively. That's why we created Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business, to help you succeed with your host, Andrew Frazier, Business Growth Pro and CFO and founder of the Small Business Pro University. Every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, we're joined by experienced entrepreneurs and business owners who share their secrets to success via live stream. Also, every Friday morning, we release a new podcast episode. Either way, you will learn about developing your business leadership skills from our roster of highly performing guest experts. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbpro.u.com.
Good evening. Welcome back to Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. I'm your host, Andrew Frazier, and once again, I'm excited about hanging out with you on Tuesday evening. As you may know, we've been doing this show for 5 years, over 250 episodes, and always appreciate our audience tuning in. At the end of the day, there's so many things that you need to know how to do to run a successful business, but it's impossible to know them all. But you have to continually work to develop and continue to learn and develop yourself and your leadership skills, because your company can only go as far as you're prepared to lead it. So that's really what this show is all about, to help enhance your business leadership skills and also to help, provide continual learning of key knowledge that entrepreneurs and business owners need to be successful. So thanks again for tuning in. Always appreciate your comments, your questions. We have people from all over, so feel free to, if you're interested, put your location in the chat. Love to see where you're joining us from. And we're going to get started. So, as you know, each week we have a great guest. And we have different topics, but, the whole theme of Small Business Pro University and what we focus on helping you to be able to do is to be able to grow your business more successfully. And tonight's topic, your business is ready to grow, but is your team ready for the change? Just because you want to grow doesn't mean your team's ready. And just because you want to grow doesn't mean you're ready. So, our guest tonight is going to talk a little bit about that. She's worked with a lot of organizations. We got Mary Lou Panzano, and looking forward to a great show tonight. So, before we get started, let me let Mary Lou on, and look forward to feel free to bring your comments and continue to comment and questions, and let's have a great evening. Hey, Mary Lou, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Andrew. It's so nice to be here. I'm honored. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, great. No, I'm glad to have you here as well. You've got a wealth of experience and knowledge, and definitely we want to take advantage of that while we've got you here. And, we'll see where things go from there. So, before we get started, we know each other somewhat, but the audience doesn't know you at all. So if you could take a few minutes to kind of talk a little bit about kind of how you got to where you are, what are some of the key milestones, so they have some perspective about, your experience in the topic that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity to give you that background. I started my career at Prudential as a secretary, and it was an interesting journey even getting to that point, because in high school I had always wanted to be a teacher. Like my whole life I always wanted to be a teacher. And I remember just before my senior year started, I was starting to write down my electives that I wanted to take because I was going to go to college to get an education degree. And my mother was sitting next to me and she said, teachers, great profession. I have high respect for teachers. She said, but for some reason you have champagne taste and teachers make a beer salary. So you're either going to have to marry rich or have a couple of jobs or do something because you're never going to be satisfied with the money that you're going to make as a teacher. So she convinced me to try going into secretarial school. And we made a deal. And I said, the only thing I'm going to do if I go to a secretarial school is come out of that with an advanced degree so that I could get a job somewhere and finish my degree and go into teaching. So that's what I had always wanted to do. But interestingly enough, in that experience, I learned that we learned an awful lot about business communications while I was at the secretarial school that I went to for 2 years. And I got a liberal arts degree from there. And it was an interesting experience because that's when I learned a lot about the fact that I was good at communications and I really enjoyed it. So fast forward a couple of years, I wind up at Prudential getting a job as a secretary, and I advanced there throughout my career. And at one point I had seen a role for a manager of communications job. And I read the description and I thought, gee, I think I could do that. I didn't have a degree in communications, but I was pretty good at putting a sentence together and I could articulate a story. So I applied for the role and I got the job. And then I felt like it was the biggest career mistake I'd ever made because I didn't really know how to handle communications and manage an organization that was going through a tremendous amount of change. So that job, I wound up in the law department, and it was at a time when Prudential was going through a major transformation. They were initiating an IPO, and they were moving from a mutual insurance company owned by its policy owners to a publicly held company. So every part of the organization was transforming how it operated in order to work in a public company environment. And now here I am in the law department, and they're making all kinds of changes for how to deliver legal services for a public company. And I didn't know the first thing about how to manage communications for major change. So it was a pretty painful couple of years learning and figuring out what wasn't working and what did work. And then I left Prudential. I was downsized there, but I was there for 22 years. And I had a number of different roles, and I left there as a director of communications. And what was interesting was that I had spent about 10 years doing communications at that company. And then I moved into the pharmaceutical industry, and I got a role at a company called Odyssey Pharmaceuticals, which went from a startup to a divestiture in about 3 months. So it was a spinoff of a larger company, pharmaceutical company, and we were starting the generics US business. And so I took a role there as head of communications, but we never really got that far with the business. So I wound up becoming an operations head actually there to help divest the company. So major change going through all of that. And then I left Odyssey and I got a job at Frazier, and the role there was head of retiree relations, which was a very interesting role. It was part of the HR communications area, but that role was working to help close the gap in communications with the retirees that not only had retired from Pfizer, but had retired from many of the companies that Pfizer had been acquiring over the previous year. So there was a lot of disconnect there, and people didn't know where to go for information. And you're talking about people who are elderly and are trying to figure out how to manage their benefits and Medicare and all of those things. And they kept writing to the board of directors all the time because they were confused and they weren't getting answers. So that I had a job there for a couple of years. And then that led me to Bayer. And I left Bayer. I worked for Bayer for 13 years. I started there as the head of internal communications for the pharmaceutical division. And then eventually got a vice president role there as the head of internal communications for Bayer's US business. When I left there, they had about 30,000 people in every state in the US. So my career started in a very different place than I thought it was. And I got to a point in 2021 after my brother had passed away. And if you remember what was going on in 2021, we were still in the throes of the pandemic. We were going through a relentless amount of stress and strain trying to help our employees through that entire process. We did a lot of crisis communications work when I was at there. And another change had happened in my department at the same time. My boss's job was eliminated. And so our team was split in two. And it just got to a point where I thought, after my brother passed away, just 3 weeks short of his 61st birthday, and he's only 2 years older than me, I thought to myself, life is too short to not do the things you love to do with the people you love to do them with most. And I think it's time for me to leave this corporate gig, as lucrative as that corporate executive role was, and step back away for a little bit and think about that thing I always wanted to do, which was teach. But I didn't know what I was going to teach. I didn't know how I was going to teach it. I didn't know a lot of things, but I knew that I needed to make a change, because what I didn't realize, Andrew, was just how burned out I was. And it took me about a year to decompress from that and deal with my brother's passing and all of the things that go along with that, and realize that I needed to do something different. And all I kept thinking about was, I know how to help organizations and people navigate through change, and not just navigate through it, but prosper through it. And I thought about it, and I dreamt about it, and I prayed on it, and I meditated on it. And all I kept coming back was, talk about this change framework that you've created to help successful change happen in all of those companies that you worked in, having earned a lot of hard-earned stripes for how to do it right. And so here we are. I started my business in 2023, and I've been coaching leaders through change over the last year and a half or 2 years or so. So that's my story. That's how I got.
Excellent. Well, it's interesting. Everybody has a different journey, and there's always twists and turns. And usually for most successful people, there's some downturns in things that you had to overcome. And even though they're bad at the time, many times that makes you into who you really are. And it helps you to really, step into your zone of genius, step into your passion, step into, what you were meant to do. I think that I don't just do this as a job, it's more of a calling,
Yeah.
And about helping people, entrepreneurs and business owners always need a lot of help because it takes a lot to do it. But, that's, for me, I started as a paper boy with a business in 4th grade. So entrepreneurship was the beginning. I went to spend time in corporate as well, and can understand the level of stress that it can put you under, especially in changing times. But really look forward to really digging into this change thing, because most organizations don't do it right, whether they're large, medium, or small.
Yes.
And you've created a framework that helps increase the likelihood of success. So look forward to that. But before we do that, the show Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business, is one of the brain trust initiatives of our Small Business Pro University. Our goal is to help entrepreneurs and business owners grow faster and easier and more successfully. But this is just one of the things that we do. So I'm going to play a short video, just sort of outlining how Small Business Pro University can potentially help you achieve your goals faster and easier. And then I'll be back talking small business with Mary Lou. Hi, Andrew here, and I'm excited to... That was the wrong video. Sorry about that. Many small businesses experience low or no revenue growth, and the owners are not making enough money. I founded Small Business Pro University to help you break that cycle by empowering you with greater knowledge and enhanced skills to lead your organization more effectively. Over the past 15 years, I've collaborated with organizations like the Small Business Development Center, Rising Tide Capital, Empower the Village, NJMEP, Rutgers University, and SCORE to work one-on-one with over 1,000 business owners and teach tens of thousands of people about business. My experience includes serving as a naval officer, managing businesses, graduating from MIT, earning an MBA from NYU, and achieving the CFA designation, which has prepared me to accomplish my mission of helping 1,000,008 business owners to sell more, maximize profit, and finance growth by 2028. My vision is to create the ultimate business ecosystem for entrepreneurs. Small Business Pro University empowers entrepreneurs like you to run their businesses more professionally and create sustainable enterprises. We employ my proven proprietary Masterpreneur Playbook framework to guide your journey along the Masterpreneur path and facilitate your Masterpreneur evolution to work on your business and scale faster and easier. Small Business Pro University provides access to valuable resources, partnerships, and relationships that will help you to sell more, maximize profit, and finance growth. Our Masterpreneur initiatives include the Small Business Pro Network, 100+ expert-led multimedia courses, intensive training workshops, Spanish language training, Leadership Live at 8:05 live stream and podcast, in-person Power Breakfast events, and advisory coaching, consulting, and training services. All right, welcome back. I'm here with Mary Lou, and your topic tonight is your business is ready to grow, but is your team ready for the change? So Mary Lou, change is, the only constant, and change is continually accelerating. But just like many words, people throw around the word change, but it means different things to different people. So when we're talking about change here tonight, what does that mean to you, and what, how should we think of change based on our discussion tonight?
So the way I think of change is really that any time that you are intentionally looking to, I hate to use the word make a change, but to advance, grow, develop, or deal with a problem or a situation that you know is frustrating and is keeping you kind of stuck and is really bothering you, in order to move past that, you have to make a change. And change really is you're in a situation now and you want to have a different situation. So in order to get from point A to point B, the change is the bridge. That's the way I think of change. And I think, it applies in a personal context. It applies in a business context. It applies in everything around us all the time is constantly changing. I mean, it's kind of cliche to even say that. But what I have found is that change is something that most people resist. And they resist it because we're kind of wired to resist change. Our brains are wired for predictability and for things that we can count on and rely on. Change means uncertainty, and uncertainty could signal like danger ahead, like there's something forward that I don't know anything about. What I know is what I can experience today. I know what's happening now, but I don't know what could happen in the future. So because of that, there's a lot of resistance to wanting to move forward through something new or something different or something that could improve your life or improve your business or help your business grow. So change does mean different things to different people, but the way I define it is really something is happening now and it's not serving your need. So in order to move forward, you need to make a change.
Okay, no, that's great. I mean, I think the big takeaway there is it's something intentional that you're trying to do differently or accomplish differently. One of the questions I always ask business owners are you running your business or is your business running you? So if you're, it takes change and managing change to be able to run your business. And unfortunately, too many of us are being run by our businesses, which you're, reacting to change
Mhm.
rather than proactively driving change. But as a business owner, it's important to drive the change within your organizations, because if you don't, who's going to do it?
Mhm.
So, um, when we talk about change, like you said, it's personal, or it can be personal or professional. And it's about leadership. It's, leadership is critical.
Yes.
And, who's the most important leader in this situation, and why?
That's a really interesting question, because the way I think about it is, the answer is it kind of depends. Oftentimes, especially in smaller businesses, the business owner is the senior most leader in the organization. But depending on people's roles, anyone can play a leadership role in an organization. Most of the time, the owner, the most senior people, are thinking about, what are the market trends? What are the economic conditions? What are consumer demands changing? Where's their gaps in our product lines or our service lines? They're thinking ahead in terms of getting market research and data to help them think about what it is they want to do next, or what they think they need to do next. So when I say they, I'm thinking of, a business owner, or the top, couple of people in an organization. Most employees are not there yet, because they're just hired to do a job most of the time, and they're not involved in those kind of decisions. So when you're thinking about leadership, and you're thinking about where we need to take the organization, they're oftentimes weeks and months, if not years, in larger organizations, ahead of where the rest of the where the rest of the employee base is. And that's where sometimes there's the big gap, is because they've got all this context and all this background about what's happening, what's working, what isn't working, why they need to make the change. And employees don't have that. And that's where one of the biggest gaps is that clarity around what's happening. So I think leaders own the ability or the need for the organization to change in order to stay competitive and grow.
Definitely, definitely. And, at Small Business Pro University, I created what we call the Masterpreneur Growth Framework,
Mhm.
which it outlines the 5 steps that a business has to take to go from startup to scaling. So,
Mhm.
first you got to work on the concept of your business. Then you work in your business, and then on your business, and then on the future of your business, and then on scaling your business.
Mhm.
And if you're going to scale, you can't skip any of those steps. But, one of the critical things is, at every step, there's a certain challenge that you're going to have to overcome. At each step, there's a certain goal that you're going to have to accomplish. At each step, there's a certain structure you have to create beneath you.
Mhm. Mhm.
And at each step, there's a certain leadership skill that you have to develop and, utilize effectively. So it's changed throughout the whole process. So as a business owner, you got to change more and faster. And that's only half of the the um the framework. The other half is, your business, there's 5 steps, but you as a business owner have to make 5 evolutions.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, you go from being a um, entrepreneur focused on problem solving, to be an employee supervisor more focused on um, delivering on your products and services and finding the right target market. And most people get stuck between step 2 and step 3, because you have to go from an employee supervisor to a manager. And a manager's job is way different than employee supervisor.
Absolutely.
You
Mhm.
know, as a manager, your job is to optimize the business. But guess what? If you want to optimize your business, you need to use numbers. And that's what I found is the greatest fear of many business owners. So that's a big reason why they don't successfully optimize their business. And then you got to become an executive, which is a whole different role because you got to lead managers. So, most managers, if they're good, if they have a manager under them, usually they micromanage them. But then you're still the manager, but you need someone doing the executive role and then CEO. So, there's a tremendous amount of change that
Yeah.
on, whatever size business you have, but even more so in a smaller business because, things change faster. A lot of times they say every time your revenues double, everything breaks. So you gotta fix everything. So, you know, given that type of change, what can one do to, I guess you have your framework. How do you manage that successfully?
Yeah. So if I could start with just helping people understand what are the most common mistakes that leaders are making when they're trying to take their organization through change. And you can think about this in the personal context too, because I always say that organizations, companies, they don't run themselves. People run them. And so if there is going to be any change, yes, there could be operational changes, processes, policies, procedures, those kinds of things that change, but those only change because there's a human being who's like driving that change forward. So I always like to start with what are the things that are not working well when when organizations are going through change? Because as you said earlier, Andrew, most organizations do not really have a good track record of success taking their teams through change. The first issue is really around most of the employees that you're talking with related to the change or trying to get to buy into the change don't necessarily understand what the change is all about. They don't understand what's driving the change, why it's necessary, what the impact is going to be on them, what are they going to have to do differently, how are they going to get support to do that differently. They're thinking, I don't know what this means for me yet, and they're trying to wrap their head around it. And that level of uncertainty and that level of a lot of questions are not answered causes confusion. And that confusion lets people more likely say, I'll deal with it when I have to, right? And that's not the attitude that you want to have when you're trying to lead through change. So that lack of understanding is the number one reason. In all of the research that I did for my book, Cementing Change, there were a number of different reports and bits of research that I saw, and that was the number one thing that kept showing up on every single list or Harvard Business Review article that I had seen. The second thing is that, and this is where the human connection piece comes in, leaders have typically been thinking well ahead of the rest of their company around what it is they want to do, why they want to do it. They've been talking with people, they've been getting advice, they've been doing research, they have the data, and then they come out and they want to tell everybody about the change. But they forget that the people they're talking to don't have that context. They don't have all that background. So now they feel sort of disconnected from what are you talking about? I haven't been hearing anything about this. What does this all mean for me? And so when that happens, they tend to just kind of get disconnected from it. And another big problem that a lot of organizations have is that they want to move right to, here's a decision. Now they want to move right to implementation. And they forget about the fact that their employees need time to process what's going on, and they need to be involved and engaged in that. And when they're not, they don't have any buy-in. They're going to be more resistant to the change. And they're just going to want to keep doing things the way they have always done them. Think about the technology changes that we're all dealing with AI and trying to figure out how to use that responsibly in our organizations to help with productivity or whatever it is we want to use it for. People need help getting there. And sometimes they have the answers to help you get there. But if you don't involve them and you just throw a decision out at them and say, deal with it, that's not very helpful. That's not very human. And that causes a lot of resistance too. The third problem that I find often is that and this, I think this tends to happen in larger organizations, because I think smaller organizations have better relationships with their employees typically than larger organizations do, because there's so many more people to have relationships with. But employees have a pretty strong affiliation with the place that they work, and they know their jobs. Sometimes they have a best friend at work or a relative at work. They're proud of what they do. They probably use the products or services that the organization offers. And then the company comes in and disrupts all that. And they expect people to be okay with it. And people are like, well, if you don't care about how this change is impacting me, well, why should I care about the change that you want to make? That lack of caring of the impact is one of the biggest disconnects that a lot of people make when they're trying to take their organization through change. If you don't show that you care about your people, why should they care about what you want to do? So those are three big mistakes, I think, that happen often. And then the last one is sometimes you go through all the gyrations and you're ready to make the change, and then things happen and you don't actually follow through on it. You don't take action, you don't take the risks, you don't move forward, you don't do what you need to do to get the organization ready and to get yourself ready to move through the change. So those are four common things that I have found in the research I did for my book, but also in my own experience, because many times I was the, person impacted by the change, not the person leading the communications for the change. And I experienced every single one of those four things that have gone wrong throughout my career more than once. So I just wanted to set the context for that around what are the biggest derailers when it comes to leading through change.
Okay, great. Well, just say them real quick, 1 through 4.
Lack of understanding.
Okay.
Lack of connection, true connection with your people and being transparent about what's going on and bringing them involved. Lack of caring about the impact of the change that's going to have on other people. Mm-hmm. And a lack of courage to do the right thing, do what you need to do to move through the change and to help your people through it.
Okay, great. And, one of the best ways to learn about things is being impacted by them. Yes. I served as a naval officer, and you saw like some amazing leaders and you saw some terrible leaders, and, being on both sides, and then you had to be a leader. So, getting that perspective is helpful. And especially given the field that you're in, you could probably see clearly, some of the challenges or shortcomings they're having throughout the process. So, definitely gives great perspective. So, I guess you were probably still in corporate when SAP came out.
Yes.
It was like the computer program that's going to change everything for corporations. And they invested millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in it. But it meant a significant change for the whole organization. And most of those projects failed. And you probably went through one while you were at Prudential. Talk a little bit about that and your experience and just what it was like going through that change and what could have made it more effective.
Yeah, I think my experience at Prudential was really an interesting one, because there were several changes happening at the same time for me. One was I changed jobs, but I stepped into a role that I didn't have a lot of background in. So for me, it was like learning a lot about the role I was hired in to do, at the same time trying to figure out how to learn that new job while the entire organization is changing and while our entire department is changing. And I think one of the other things that was really interesting at that time was that on both the insurance and investment sides of Prudential's business at the time, both of them were facing multi-year billion-dollar class action litigation suits. And so the law department was leading the organization through the settlements and the whole litigation issue at the same time that it was going through this major change in terms of how it was going to deliver legal services. So when I think about those 4 C's that I just mentioned, I didn't talk about the 4 C's yet, but when I think about those 4 issues that I just mentioned earlier, was around the clarity around the change. So when I'm going to talk about this from the perspective of the job that I had just taken over, that I was promoted into, and it was a new role. So it's not like there was somebody who was in that job who could talk to me about, like, show me the ropes. Let's put it that way. I was making it up as I went along and, just working with my manager and my team. But the first mistake I made was that I wasn't really clear about what I was expected to do in that role. I didn't ask good enough questions, and I didn't really understand what the gravity of and the enormity of the change that our department was going to be going through, that I was leading the communications for. So that lack of clarity was all on me for not really understanding enough about what I was stepping into. I may not have accepted the offer if I knew all of those things I was going to be responsible for communicating for in a very short period of time as they rolled out best practices for the new legal department. The second thing was that I didn't know the team. I was new to the team. I didn't know who I could work through. I didn't have good relationships with the people I was just now, who were peers on my team. So that was a big challenge for me to get through, establishing, nurturing those relationships, building credibility with them that I could actually do something. But that bothered me a lot because I didn't know how to get help. The third problem that I was having was that I was so worked up about not being able to figure out how to get this job done. And I was very concerned about my career. And I thought I just made the biggest career mistake of my life, that I wasn't taking enough care of myself. One of the things that's related to problems that leaders have is that they forget that if they don't have the, physical, emotional, spiritual, and physical strength and stamina to lead an organization through change, they're not going to be able to make it through. So you have to take care of yourself. I didn't do a very good job of that either. So that was a bad lesson learned for I should say a good lesson learned on how to do that better. And then I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to make it, and that I was afraid I was going to fail in this role. And that was just the personal change that I was dealing with. Over time, I discovered that there were things that were not working so well, and there were things that were working better. And the things that were working better was when I got clear about what I needed to do, when I started working with and through other people to get things done, when I took good care of myself, and when I let go of the fear and said, you can figure it out, you can get it done, you can manage it, there's people around you to help you. So I share that experience with Prudential because that approach to how to deal with my own personal change is the same approach that you use to when you're taking a business through change.
Excellent. So, yeah, I mean, definitely, the first person that you got to manage through change is yourself.
Yes.
And, that can be a handful.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't do that, if you can't lead yourself through the change, how's anyone else going to follow you through the process? So, it's definitely important for you to, figure that out and take the time necessary to do that before you start to change and influence other people to get them to change.
Yeah, and it's a really good point, Andrew, because in the communications role that I had, part of my job was to advise the leaders on how to help them help their teams through this change. And it wasn't just a matter of prepping them with speaking notes or PowerPoints or how to have staff meetings. Those things were all helpful, but it was really about helping them deal with the change. Because if you think of those kinds of changes, when an organization is going through like a massive transformation like that, it impacts the leader too. Mm-hmm. Like they're dealing with, this is changing me too. There's a restructuring, or there's a new way of operating, or there's new legal systems we're going to be using. We changed the entire legal billing system with outside counsel, like all kinds of things were changing around them too. that not only did they have to influence their teams to want to be on board with these changes, but they had to deal with the changes themselves.
Definitely.
Yeah,
And it puts a lot of stress on them.
it does.
And,
Absolutely.
and it takes a lot of different skills to manage through change. And a lot of people may not have developed those skills, even though they're in a leadership position. So I think that's the challenge. I always go back to like one of the 3 books that I always recommend for people to read. One, it helps you with sales, but it's even more about leadership, is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're going to make a change, you're going to have to influence people. And, it's easier to influence people who know you, like you, and trust you, which is sort of making friends.
Right.
So, and he's got great examples and ways to approach it. But, talk a little bit about sort of how you as a leader, what types of skills and capabilities are critical for you to be able to lead through change.
Yeah, I think the first skill, and I think it's becoming more and more of a lost skill, is the skill of listening, really listening to your people, and listening not to judge and not to question, but listening to understand. One of the CEOs that I interviewed for my book talked about it in terms of listening in neutral, like I just want to hear your point of view. And I think one of the things that leaders lose sight of is that their employees are typically on the front lines. They're talking to customers. They're dealing with issues. They're handling the supply chain. They know what's working in an organization and they know what's not working. And if you're going to ignore all of that intelligence, shame on you, because you're missing out on a great, rich set of data that can help you just help you improve your organization. So I think listening is one of those skills that we all can hear, right? But listening in neutral is a nuance. And I think that winds up not happening enough in organizations. I think one of the other ones is being authentic and being candid and transparent to the degree that you can. Sometimes there are things that organizations are going through that they're the kinds of transformations that could be market moving and they have to be kept confidential. I understand that. But if you have a vision for where you want to take your organization, or you have a growth strategy that you've been building, people should not be hearing about it one time and you expect them to know the whole story and to help them to move and expect them to move forward on it very quickly. People need constant repetition about what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Why does it matter? What is your role in this? What do we want this to look like and feel like? What's our vision for the future? You need to be planting those seeds and talking about them all the time. And I think sometimes leaders will just say, well, we talked about that 6 months ago. Why don't they remember it? Well, people have so many distractions in their life. They need I don't even know what the numbers are anymore for people to recognize that they've seen an ad for something. I think it used to be something like 8 or 9, 10 times before people realize that they have seen something for the first time. Now it's more like 20 or 30 because there's so much distraction. Being authentic and, demonstrating that you care about your people. And there's lots of ways that you can do that. But I think that leaders sometimes just forget that people are people. They're human beings. And they don't leave their hearts and their issues at home when they come to work, whether they're working remotely or whether they're working in an office or in a factory or wherever. People bring their whole person to work, not just the employee. And treating people like people winds up becoming a challenge sometimes. And it really, I feel like that is something that just is missing a lot in the workplace. Leaders need to be adaptable. They need to be more resilient now than ever. That's why it's so important that they take care of themselves. What else can I say? I think that one of the other things that leaders are really struggling with is, you mentioned it earlier, Andrew, like the pace of change, and it just continues to accelerate, and just trying to stay on top of all of that, that's why it's so important to listen to your people and listen to employees, because they have a sense for things that you may not be able to see. Most leaders, most business owners, they can't possibly know everything that's going on in the organization. They might think they do, but they probably don't. So use your people. They're there. Take advantage of them. But you have to have good relationships with them at the same time.
Definitely, definitely. And, you talked about listening and neutral, which is important. And even more importantly, having empathy. I mean, I think that the larger an organization gets, many times the less empathy leaders have for other people, lower levels in the organization. And that's just a function of kind of who tends to get promoted. And, sometimes lacking some empathy allows you to do some things that other people wouldn't be willing to do. But then when you lead change, it doesn't, it works against you. So, definitely, being authentic is key. But, another thing, you want to think about it as a business owner, like whatever role you're in, as part of the change leadership, leadership's different now. You can't just be like, okay, we're doing this and and it gets done. It's not like the military, they're like, all right, everybody's going to be here at 7 a.m. and everybody does, So the other thing is you have to sell the change. You can't just be like, this is what we're going to do. You have to actively have a strategy for selling. And you talked about it, how important communications is. And, we've got some questions here. And, one of them was about, let's see, where is it? Okay. Okay. What is the most common communication mistake leaders make during periods of growth?
I'm going to double tap this one a little bit. The first mistake that I have found is just very prevalent, is that when leaders are ready to make a change, if they have someone who helps them with communications, they'll bring the communications person in. They typically haven't been involved in the decision making. So the communication itself is usually not clear. It's usually, oftentimes it's laden with, I'll call it corporate speak, or like a lot of business language, versus here's what we're doing. Here's the what's happening. Here's the so what. Here's why that matters. And here's the now what. Here's what to expect. Here's what we're going to be sharing with you. Here's what we're going to be doing. Here's where we're going to need your help. Here's where we're going to need your ideas. A lot of times it's like a fire hose. They just dump this all out and then they walk away. Leaders walk away and just go back and do their jobs. They have to stay present. So when I think about communication, it's not just delivering the message, but it's being present. It's being available. It's being, accessible, and repeating over and over again what it is that you need to do. And in different ways, sometimes it's electronically, sometimes it's roundtable conversation. Sometimes the more you can get in front of your people and continue to repeat over and over again what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, that's the biggest mistake I find. The other thing is, and it's kind of connected to this idea of engaging and involving your people, is your manager level groups of employees need to be the first people to understand what's happening. You need to involve them, engage them, answer their questions to the degree that you can, and be able to prepare them to have the conversations with their teams about what this change means for us. Because that group of people, it's usually the middle manager. Andrew, you talked about them before as part of one of those steps that you were talking about, is really important, because that group of people are the people that most employees know, like, and trust the most. They're the ones they get most of their direction from. They're the ones who they complain to. They're the ones who they bring ideas to. And if they've been out of the loop and they don't know anything more than the employees know, you've missed it. You've missed the boat. So those are the sort of the two that come to mind most when I think about the communication gaps that often happen when change starts to get announced in organizations.
Okay, no, that's definitely true. You really have to have your whole leadership team on board with the change, and because they're the ones who are representing the change, and if they don't embrace it, the people below them definitely aren't going to embrace it. So, taking the time to work it through the different levels is key. Now, in this environment, work is a little different than it's been in the past. So, how does that framework change, or does it change when we're talking about remote or hybrid teams rather than just single location on-site teams?
Yeah, I really like this question because the physical location of where people are, in my personal opinion and in my experience, really does matter, because there are things that get talked about when people are physically together, and there are things that don't get talked about when people can't physically be together. And so sometimes people who are in remote in working conditions or in some sort of hybrid work setting, they could miss the richness of those conversations that happen extemporaneously when they are together, whether it's on site or at a specific location. So I think the best way to deal with that is to just make sure that you're having open and honest conversations with your team on a very regular basis. I'll give you an example. When I was in charge of communications for Bayer's US business, and we were in the throes of the COVID pandemic, I had a touch base meeting with my team every single morning for half an hour. And we probably were just on the phone together at 8 o'clock the night before, getting messages out, keeping our employees informed about what was happening, what's expected of them, what kinds of resources do they have. We made a lot of exceptions to policies, and we're introducing some new things for employees to help them through this very difficult period that we were all dealing with, while we were trying to continue to, deliver life-saving medicines and keep the world fed, right? during the pandemic, because we were in agriculture and healthcare and pharmaceuticals. So sometimes those conversations, and we were not physically together. Everybody was working from home at that point. We had all been assigned home unless our roles could not be done at home, like in manufacturing or something. But there were some times when our conversations those mornings were just about, how are you doing today? What help do you need? What support do you need? What challenges are you facing? Sometimes we're just going to talk about stuff not related to work today because we need a mental health break time. But that consistency of being present with the team is what is most important as a leader and as a manager. And I think that is one of the things that sometimes gets missed. I'm not saying have a staff meeting just to have a staff meeting. We were doing important work, but we were also continuing to build and nurture relationships. And that was critical, especially when you're in a crisis situation, because not for anything, but people would like lay on a sword for me because I was there listening with them. I was in the same situation that they were in, and we were all trying to work through it together. But having that, you mentioned it earlier, the empathy and that just treating people like treating people was really, that makes the difference, whether you're at the site or you're in a situation where you're working remotely or hybrid. There's still ways to nurture and build strong relationships and trust with your teams. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think, like you mentioned, you have to be even more cognizant and focused on managing change and communicating, the more virtual the environment, because you don't interact as much or as deeply unless you intentionally do it.
Yeah.
And just in general, people tend to remember only like 30% of what they hear.
If that,
So
yeah.
in any situation, you need to say things at least 3 times. And that's kind of strange because a lot of times as a leader, you're used to getting stuff the first time.
Yes.
But when you're talking to other people, many times, they might not be as interested in what you're saying or whatever. But many times, you're going to have to communicate multiple times. And a lot of times that doesn't happen, and in multiple ways. When I teach,
yes,
everybody has different ways of learning and interacting with the world. So when I do training, many times I will say what I'm going to say. I'm going to show an image on a slide, and then I try and give an example so that, one, I'm communicating it 3 times, but in 3 different ways and medias, so that the way people receive information makes it more likely that they'll get what I'm communicating. So, I'm sure you've seen that as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So, there's only one bad thing about this show. You know what that is? It's only an hour. It's already almost 9 o'clock. I'm like, how did this happen every week?
But you said it. You said this is going to go by fast.
Yes, no, it goes by really quick because there's a whole bunch more we could talk about. But I don't think the audience is going to hang out with us to do that. So, but before we wrap up, like I said, communication is key. And, what we like to do before wrapping up is if you could share 3 key takeaways for people to focus on based on what we discussed. Because, one, most people can't remember more than 3 things anyways. And, it just makes it bite-sized and implementable. So if you could think about that, I'm going to give you a minute to work on that, and I'll play a short video, and then we'll come back and close things out. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay, excellent. So here we go. Hi, Andrew here, and I'm excited to announce the launch of our new book, 99 Proven Tips to Accelerate Your Masterpreneur Journey. 5 years, 33 incredible guests, hundreds of powerful business lessons, and now it's all in one place. Introducing 99 Proven Tips to Accelerate Your Masterpreneur Journey, a brand new book built from the insights, wisdom, and strategies shared by the guest experts of our podcast, Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Inside, you'll discover actionable tips on how to launch smarter.
So if you have an idea that you have researched and you know who your customer is and you think that you've got the experience you need, now is a perfect time to start a business. But remember, start as a side hustle first.
Grow faster.
So sales is about problem solving, not about manipulating. You have to understand the math of your business, the sales math.
Lead more effectively.
You shouldn't expect someone to be you. You have to understand and create processes to basically train people on how to handle certain situations and basically set people on the right path, right? So they can become successful within your organization.
And scale your business with confidence.
Bet on yourself and not be afraid to take risks and to know that you have within you the ability to accomplish your dreams and accomplish your goals.
Think like an entrepreneur. Now, I know there may be many entrepreneurs listening, but there may be some who aren't entrepreneurs. It's all well and good. I'm here to say entrepreneurship is not just something you do, it's a way that you think. And the characteristics of an entrepreneur's thinking are creativity, resourcefulness, courage, resilience, and passion.
This isn't theory, it's practical advice straight from entrepreneurs and thought leaders who have done it. 5 years of conversations, 33 voices of experience, and now 99 tips to accelerate your masterpreneur journey. Get your copy today. Pre-order now to reserve your signed copy. Click the button below or scan the QR code to order from www.sbprou.com/99-tips. Okay, welcome back. I'm here with Mary Lou. We're talking small business. Tonight's topic is your business is ready to grow, but is your team ready for the change? So, Mary Lou, what are the 3 key takeaways people should, go home with and utilize to help them be more successful with their business?
Yeah, so I think the first one really is that I think we all agree that change is necessary to grow, whether it's personally or to grow your business. And the more that you can communicate what the change is about, why the change is necessary, how it's going to impact people, how you're going to be able to support people through the change are critical communications, messages and actions actually that leaders need to focus on. And I would say I didn't specifically talk about the 4 C's recipe, but in order to make that communication work, you really need to have clarity, know and stick to the goal. You need to have connection. You need to engage and involve your people in that change journey. You need to show caring, that you care about your people and you care enough about them to help them through and support them through the change. And then you need to take care of yourself too, so that you have the stamina in order to do that. And you also have to have courage. You have to have courage to take risks and to always do the right thing legally, ethically, and morally, because one change you don't want to make is to learn how to live in prison if you do something really that isn't upright and that isn't the right thing to do. If you use those 4 C's in your communications: clarity, connection, caring, and courage, you will have a better chance of success. So the number one thing is that change is something you're going to have to do in order to grow, but there's a way to go about it that has a better chances of success. So that's the number one thing I want you to take away. The second is that remember that, while your business may have lots of machines operating for it, most of your business is human beings. It's relationships. Always remember to show that you care about your people. When I talk to university students about this change framework, they're very surprised to hear that there's a businesswoman in front of them talking about caring in the workplace. I think we've lost that ability to care for people, and not across the board, but sometimes we just get so busy we forget that there's a human being on the other side of what we're trying to do. And then the third thing, we didn't really talk a lot about this, but I think it's sort of inherent in some of the conversation that we had, was don't go at it alone. Change requires bringing your leaders in, bringing your managers in, bringing your people in, get the help that you might need, get the coaching. The best athletes still have coaches. The most successful leaders have boards of directors and masterminds and advisors around them. Get the help you need in order to move through the change and to help your business grow, because nobody does it alone. There's no such thing as self-made millionaires. I don't believe in that. So those are my 3 things.
Excellent. So no, I think that's key. Change is inevitable and necessary. And if you're going to go through change, you may as well try and do it the right way. With clarity, with connection, with caring, and with courage. So definitely that's a great framework for leaders, and doesn't just have to be leaders, because everyone needs to be a leader within every organization, based on where they are and what they're responsible for.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's key. I always say that you have to deal with tasks efficiently and people effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And, effectively, efficiently means, as quickly as possible, but effectively means in the most appropriate way as possible. And so what you do with one person might need to be different than what you do, how you approach another person. And sometimes, fast is slow and slow is fast. I don't know how many of you watch, but they had a great, what is it? Navy SEALs or SEAL Team 6 show. And, they would always say slow is fast and fast is slow. So, it's important to understand that, what seems like the most expedient way when you're dealing with people, that may not be the best way to go. And then third, it's a team sport. It's a team effort, unless you're just trying to change yourself. But even if you change yourself, many times you need a coach for that too.
Absolutely.
Experience, perspective, wisdom, and knowledge are critical. And if this is an area that you don't have those, you need to work with someone who does. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody knows everything. But, being smart enough to know that you could benefit from somebody else's guidance, it was one thing that, helps make, important key of a lot of good leaders. So no, this has been great. Mary Lou, I appreciate you joining me, and glad we had a chance to hang out tonight.
Same here. Thank you so much. And I appreciate everyone's comments. And I think we got a few questions in too today. So I really appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. So, it's been a good topic. People are, engaging. So we always love engagement, questions, comments, likes, whatever. Because that lets us know that we're doing what we're supposed to do tonight. We're not doing this for us. We're doing this for you. So, glad to see that, you're finding value in this. So thanks again, Mary Lou. Your chat, or in the chat, is your website and your LinkedIn profile, so people can feel free to reach out to you as well. Anything you want to share before we close out?
Yeah, the only thing I would like to do is just let everyone know that I just released the book on this called Cementing Change, Cracking the Code for Communications That Work. And it dives into what's going on in the workplace today and what leaders need to be paying attention to. And it goes into depth on this 4Cs framework and the behaviors behind it. So just wanted to let you know that that's available now. And I look forward to another chance to just continue to engage with anyone who needs some help in this space, because it's a very important topic, and it's going to make a difference in your business for sure.
Definitely. So once again, thank you. If you can, just hang out for a minute as I close things out.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you again.
All right. Thanks. All right, everybody. Thanks. I appreciate you joining us again. Just a couple things of note. Number one, that we have our Masterpreneur Growth Symposium, a full-day event where we're going to focus on re-engineering small business growth. By starting with diagnosis, developing strategies, and helping you scale. So that's July 31st here in Florham Park, New Jersey, at the Park Avenue Club. So if you're available, it's going to be really powerful. So hopefully you can join us. As well, later this month, we're going to be launching the next cohort of the Small Business Pro certification program. So if you're thinking about going into business and less than 100K in revenues, this is the program for you, because this is where we focus on the critical first step of successfully working in your business, so then you can start working on your business. So definitely you're invited to join us. I think we put the info in the chat, or if not, we will in a sec. So check out the certification program. It's a 12-week program that I teach, and combination of online virtual and online on demand. And, at the end of the day, as a business owner, the more that you know, the faster and more successfully your business is going to grow.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Live at 805, Talking Small Business. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbpro.u.com.